Can a craft distiller be a true competitor to a major distillery? Let's find out. What's up, everybody? It's Ty the Bourbon Guy, and welcome back to my channel. Today, we're going to talk about Holladay Distillery out of Missouri. Now, I've done a review of theirs, the soft red wheat. That's the bottled and bond. So for those not familiar, bottled and bond has to be 100 proof. To go from 100 proof to a Rickhouse proof, which is their terminology, I would assume is the same as barrel proof or cask strength. It should be all the same, I would imagine. 120.1 is what this bottle actually is. So to go from 100 to 120.1, can this really be that big of a difference? Can the proof help it, or is it just going to hurt it and feel too hot? That's what I'm going to figure out today. The fact that this says wheated bourbon, so a bourbon has to at least be 51% or more of corn, right? That's one of the stipulations in order for it to be called a bourbon. So when somebody has a wheated bourbon, all that's really referring to is what I call the secondary grain. So in a lot of bourbons, you have rye as a secondary component, and then you have barley. That's the three that typically make it up. But if you have wheat, then sometimes you could take the wheat in place of the rye. So you have corn, wheat, barley. Is there really that big of a difference? In my opinion, yes. A rye bourbon for me is typically a little spicier. I think it can be a little bit more balanced out, but if it's a high rye, I definitely feel that more of that spice come through. With a wheated bourbon, a lot of the times for me, it drinks softer. It's more approachable, but doesn't necessarily make it better one way or the other. It's really your preference, number one, and then two, how good that distillery is at doing those things. But when we start looking at a wheated bourbon that's at a higher proof, especially 120, when we're in that range, I think the one that comes to mind is Weller Full Proof. That's a bottle that a lot of people are chasing after. I get asked about that bottle constantly, and within good reason. A lot of times it's a very good bottle. I don't know that I've ever had a bad one or anything like that. For me, all that really depends on is the price that I'm paying for it. That's where I start to figure out if it's worth it or not for me. But I know people that that's their favorite bourbon ever, and they're willing to pay that price no matter what it is marked up to. But in my personal opinion, I think $400 or $500 is ridiculous. So finding an alternative is always kind of the mission. Finding something that's findable and finding something that's price-wise not going to kill the bank. You know, can you do it? And then not only can you find it, but can a craft distiller be the one that does it? Let's find out right now. So on the nose for me, it is like a traditional wheated bourbon. I hate using that because, like, what does that mean, right? But for me, a lot of wheated bourbons, I typically get some sort of red fruit note, whether it's cherry or raspberry, something like that, some type of fruit, red fruit. Sometimes I get jelly or toast, like the wheat comes through on it, all those things. And I think for me, this nose is still following along those lines. There's also that like sweet oak on the nose too, where it's funny, and I don't know, like, you know, just is it in my head now because it's called Rickhouse proof, but it reminds me of that. It reminds me of that sweet oak that you can smell when you go into a Rickhouse and all the barrels are there and all the evaporation, all the angel share, all the, you know, bourbon that's kind of seeping out of those barrels, that smell that you smell there, that's what this reminds me of. Could be the power of persuasion, where the fact that they called it a Rickhouse proof, I don't know. Let's stop all the talking, let's taste it. Cheers. So again, this is 120.1 proof. A lot of the times what I suggest is, like, especially with a proof like that, take the initial sip and just kind of let that burn set in, and then go from there and take another sip to really get more of the actual flavor out, because by that point your mouth is kind of numb to it and you could probably pick up more flavor. The initial side's going to drink a little hotter. I do think it drinks its proof. I think a 120 feels about right for this. For me though, it's not like an instant burn. It's like a slow burn, but it definitely is warming and all that stuff. I can already start to get some of the flavor out of it, but I want to, again, go back to it because now my palate is kind of acclimated to the high proof alcohol. Yeah, all the same flavors are there and they are turned up. I'm really getting a lot of raspberry. The toasted, you know, I hate saying that, like wheat bread, because it's wheated bourbon, we get it, but it is there. It's all the same notes that I typically get on a wheated bourbon, but they are turned all the way up. The raspberry, the toasted wheat, the sweet oak, I get like toasted caramel and vanilla almost too on the back end. There is a lot of richness to this whiskey. There's depth to this whiskey, and those are two things that I look for in every review I do. I'm always looking for Like, I can handle different notes. If it's a little oakier, I can handle it. If it's more of like a fruity floral, whatever, if we're going in that direction, I can handle that. So I can typically go with wherever direction we need to go with the whiskey, but I want there to be richness to it. I want there to be a great mouthfeel. I want there to be depth there when it comes to flavor and really provide a great experience. That's what I'm always looking for within a whiskey. So initially I said it drinks its proof. The more that I sip on this, the more that backs off. Flavor is still there. There is that richness. We're not losing anything on the flavor side just because I'm starting to get acclimated to the proof. But what it's doing is it's actually making it more approachable for me, and it's making me want to keep going back, which can be a little dangerous when you're talking about 120 proof whiskey. But yes, very flavorful, very rich. Again, mouthfeel is there. The finish, this still keeps going. And sometimes within a finish of a whiskey, I feel the warmth, like the Kentucky hug, although this is Missouri. You feel that, but the flavors kind of die out, even though I still feel the warmth. And sometimes I think people still classify that as a finish. For me, I'm looking for that flavor is still lingering. That's what I'm looking for in a finish, and it's still there. So I would say it's a long finish. We're on the right path for sure. Let's keep going, finish this one off, and give final thoughts. I don't know what else I could ask for in a whiskey. It has a balance between oak. I would say the spice isn't necessarily there as much. I don't really get any spice, but the proof is kind of helping it feel a little bit more balanced. You have the sweet, you have the heat coming from the proof, which starts to dial back a little bit the more that I continue with it. You have the oak that's there. It doesn't taste over oaked. It's like I said, more of a sweet oak kind of coming together there. The finish is there. The vanilla, the caramels are rich, and there's depth there. At the end of the day, is it good or not? It's fantastic. That's the first thought. The second thought then becomes price. If I'm thinking of this in terms of, can this really truly replace a Weller Full Proof? I'll say yes. I think absolutely, because the price that you're going to pay if you find a Weller Full Proof, and I'm thinking of, not if you win a lottery or have a connection and you get it at retail price. I'm thinking of all those marked up prices. You see them, people call them bourbon museums, right? You go into a liquor store, it's sitting on the shelf because they marked it up to $400 or something like that. You could get however many of these. You can get 5 of these, 6 of these for that type of price. Is this worth it more? Like, yeah. I absolutely think that. I think you run a greater risk of hearing all the hype of Weller Full Proof, spending that type of money on it, and then trying it and thinking like, I don't know if that was really worth $500. And again, it's not supposed to be $500. That's kind of the point of like any marked up whiskey. But when you're talking about spending $70, $80, whatever it may be for this bottle here, higher proof, it's age stated, it's a craft distillery doing stuff out of Missouri. And I rated the original, the Bottled and Bond, at a 91. And I kind of had my doubts. I heard this being hyped up, the Rickhouse proof, and I kept thinking it's 20 proof points. So you are going a totally different direction because, in my opinion, like something even like a Maker's Mark, regular Maker's Mark versus a private select or a cask strength Maker's is a world of difference. So I think when it comes to a lot of different whiskeys, I'm thinking 20 proof points could make the world of difference. Now that I've tried it, I absolutely think it makes the world of difference. Nothing wrong with the regular Bottled and Bond, but that Rickhouse proof is the one I'm chasing every single time from this point on. Like I said, rated this one a 91. We did all that, talked about all that one before. This one's got to be a 94. I'm going to rate it 94 out of 100. And on top of that, overall on my leaderboard, in terms of whiskeys that I've enjoyed or whatever the case is, last year's Elijah Craig C923 was one of the best whiskeys I've ever had. That is at the top of my leaderboard. That's number 1 right now. Number 2 is going to be this one. This is easily the best one I've had this year, and it's one of the best whiskeys I've ever had. So if you can get this, do it. Stock up on it. Do whatever, but at least try it. Even at $70, $80, it's still a buy for me. This is one that I wouldn't necessarily wait on. If you see it, I think that the hype is starting to build up a little bit. If you see it, just get it. It's definitely worth it in my opinion. And I'm going to be stocking up whenever I see it. I might have to make a trip down to the distillery and maybe even shoot some content while I'm down there. But all that talking, like I said, 94 out of 100. The best whiskey I've had so far yet this year. Still got a while to go. And that'll do it. I appreciate you tuning into today's video. Thank you so much for all the support to the channel. And I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.